Blessings, good evening to you all. Tuesday night. So we have a few questions have come in. Those of you living in Melbourne or Sydney, I hope you're doing well in lockdown. Now they're getting serious about lockdown, so you have to do your best to follow the rules. There's a question here. Lumpur, can you give clarification on sati and panya, mindfulness and wisdom, and sati and sampajanya, clear comprehension? Are these the same? How are these related to Samadhi? Well, as you've written, sati, often translated as mindfulness, translated from the Thai, we say recollection. You're very close to remembering. So one of the roots of the word sati is to remember. So another way you could say is to keep in mind, or to be mindful, or to recollect. So you have to be recollecting something or mindful of something. So it needs an object. Panya means wisdom, but it's a broad term. You could say it's that knowledge which helps you understand how to end suffering as an experience. But it's the function of our intelligence, directing our intelligence towards solving a problem. And the problem is we have stress, suffering, so using your intelligence to solve that. But we have, we could say, levels of wisdom, depths of wisdom. So we have just the learning of theories and concepts. So like say the Four Noble Truths is the Buddha's teaching on how to deal with the problem of suffering. It's pointing out the suffering, and then there's a cause for it, and there's the cessation of suffering, and there's the path that leads to the cessation of suffering. These four truths. And in the beginning we just hear them. If you've heard them many times, maybe it just puts you to sleep because you've heard so many times. But you hear the words and you probably understand the words. If you've heard them a few times, you'll start to understand the words. So that's one level of wisdom, just hearing and then understanding the concepts. But we don't yet know with our heart, with our citta, the Four Noble Truths. And you have to take the theory and put it into practice until you've seen, known for yourself from your own experience. And wisdom becomes something that's just there in your mind. It's automatic. It's no longer just a theory to be discussed or contemplated, thought about. There's no longer guessing or fumbling at the truth, guessing about the truth. It's just knowing this is suffering, this is its cause, this is what you have to do to end that suffering. But it's a very useful phrase. We say sati panya, mindfulness is wisdom, because it kind of summarizes all other aspects of the path of practice into this simple little phrase. So we say, cultivate mindfulness and wisdom and you'll overcome your suffering. It's a handy way of speaking. Sati Sampajanya is perhaps slightly more technical, more directed. Really Sampajanya, which we translate as clear comprehension or clear knowing or all-round knowing, all-round awareness. This is a part of panya, a part of wisdom. So how do we practice Sampajanya? Well, it's linked to sati, linked to mindfulness. So for example, you're training your mindfulness in anapanasati, knowing the in and out breath. And clear comprehension, Sampajanya, supports that. So you're knowing, say, why you're doing it. Why am I practicing, putting my attention or recollecting the breath? What's the purpose of it? How to do it well? What's going on in this moment as I do this? You're knowing the sort of the various details to do with that particular practice of mindfulness and the experience of being mindful or training in mindfulness of the breathing. So you're knowing if the breath is long or short, coarse or refined. You know if it's the beginning of the breath or the middle or the end. But you also know why you're doing it. You know, what's the purpose of it? You're training your mind to have mindfulness. You know, if you talk about it as a thing, there's something you're trying to bring up and have mindfulness. So that also exposes when you're not mindful, when you're forgetting the breath, you're not keeping the breath in mind, you forget it, you're not mindful, and clear comprehension has to come in at that point also. And it's like the instruction, the direction saying, hey, you're not mindful of the breath at this moment. That's clear comprehension coming into action. So these two qualities, sati, sampajanya, are kind of close, inseparable, like two friends. And they're training the mind. And you don't just have to train in mindfulness of breathing. You know, you can practice marana sati, mindfulness of death as an object. It's quite a useful way to develop mindfulness, because when you recollect death as a concept, say just now we did that chant, sabbe sankhara anicca. You know, we contemplate my life is uncertain, my death is certain. You know, it makes you very mindful, doesn't it? It brings your attention to the present moment, cuts through lots of daydreaming, thinking about the future, the past, all kinds of casual thoughts about different kinds of sense desire. Brings your attention right to the present moment when you recollect death. Wakes you up a bit. It can cut through sleepiness as well. Like if you knew you're about to die, you probably wouldn't be falling asleep. That's why they say, you know, it's good to practice in places where there's a little bit of risk or danger, because it wakes you up, makes you mindful. But we train in different ways to develop the quality of mindfulness, to bring up mindfulness. Training in precepts is the same. To practice the 5 precepts, you need mindfulness. And clear comprehension is supporting that, you know, remembering a precept. You've undertaken to refrain from killing. So when the intention to kill, you know, say you have a fly bothering you and you want to squash it, the intention to kill may come up. Clear comprehension has to quickly be there and say, oh, hold on, you're keeping a precept. What are you doing with that hand? You know, it's the instructor saying, why are you raising your hand about to squash that fly? Didn't you undertake to keep the precept? You know, it's that kind of understanding of what you're doing at that moment in that situation. What's the aim of your action? What's going on? It's that all-round awareness. So you're practicing mindfulness with precepts, practicing mindfulness with meditation techniques, and so on. Mindfulness is a quality that's always helpful in every aspect of life, and Sampajanya is a support to it. Ajahn Chah used to say, it's that part of the mind, mindfulness is the part of the mind that says, what am I doing now? Just bringing attention to pay attention to the present moment. You might just be sitting, thinking, so what am I thinking about? You might be talking, what am I talking about? What is the place, the context? That's where Sampajanya comes in. It's the answer to that question, what am I doing? Mindfulness is the question, Sampajanya is the answer. Oh, I'm driving my car, I'm listening to the Dhamma, I'm eating my food, I'm going to sleep now. It's the answer. So you're fully understanding, fully knowing what you're doing in that situation. So where we practice sati and sampajanya most intensely and continuously is in meditation, because you really refine your awareness down maybe to one object. People always say it's difficult to be mindful when you go to work because there's so many things happening, people coming and going, different tasks you're doing, and it seems difficult to be mindful. Where is it hard to be mindful? When you go shopping, sensory overload. So many shops, so many people, so many things happening. So you need a lot of mindfulness and clear comprehension when you go shopping. That's why it's helpful to write a list and have a clear idea. What am I going? Where am I going? What's the shop I need to go to? What's the product I'm going to buy? Because there's so much sensory overload, we can easily get lost in that sort of situation and not very mindful, and so on. Life is full of different challenging situations. So we need sati and sampajanya in daily life as well as in meditation. Panya, wisdom, is like a third friend. So you've got sati sampajanya already holding hands, going through your day, doing things. Then panya is like a third friend who really gives you the overall picture of what your goal is. Your goal is to ascertain the nature of what it is you're dealing with and where suffering is coming up and what you can do to end it. So sati and sampajanya is bringing your attention to the present moment. Practiced it through the mindfulness of breathing, mindfulness of any other object, recollecting the Buddha. Metta bhavana also bring up mindfulness and clear comprehension. Wisdom is now directing your intelligence to really understand what's going on and the nature of phenomena, the things you're involved with. Mindfulness brings your mind to that point where it's knowing things in a very unbiased way, in a detached way. So you know the breath, say, and you're not forming an opinion, I like the breath, I don't like the breath. You're not creating suffering out of the breath. You're just knowing, breathing in, breathing out, or knowing the body, or knowing the object of metta, or whatever it is you're meditating on, or in a situation, a more broad situation where you're just going about your day, working or traveling, you have mindfulness of the present moment, what you're doing, where you're going. Wisdom comes in to kind of manage the situation as well and see, am I creating suffering here? Am I achieving my goal here? Am I creating suffering here? If suffering has arisen as experience, what can I do with this? What can I learn from this? It's also that ability to learn from experience. But mindfulness helps you to pay attention and gives you the kind of the right atmosphere for learning from your experience. You're just paying attention without judging, without getting lost in your emotions. Once mindfulness is there, wisdom can function. It can say, oh, this thought is impermanent. What is impermanent is not a person, me, you, a self. It's just thought arising. It's a mental state. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it wholesome? Is it not? Wisdom starts to understand those things, sees impermanence, sees the lack of self in an experience. But it relies on sati and sampajanya to help it. So sometimes we say sati and sampajanya is the vehicle. Wisdom is the one driving the vehicle, but the vehicle gets you to the place, and then the person driving is there, then they can see and engage and know what's going on and what needs to be done. So obviously we can train wisdom, the wisdom faculty, in any situation, not necessarily in meditation, just going about your business, learning to solve problems, do things, achieve things in life. You're training the wisdom faculty, but True wisdom is directed towards cultivating the path for the end of suffering, and seeing what needs to be cultivated and what's going on to really get to the point where you know the true nature of physical and mental phenomena that you're engaged with at that moment. So broad, it's a quality of mind that needs to be developed in many, many ways, but they're like three qualities, three friends that help each other. It's just the one mind. So Ajahn Chah used to say, you pick up a piece of wood, a stick or a log or a plank of wood. Samadhi is at one end, panya is the other end, but you pick up the log, they both come up together. Like you're training in sati, Sampajanya and panya, they're all working together in the one mind. So ultimately, they're parts of the path. The different factors of the path come together to change the way the mind is working and operating, the way it views the world. We're changing our view of the world, breaking through the delusions of the world, based on self, attachments to the senses and the objects of the senses with a sense of self, breaking through the idea of self, questioning it, looking through it. But it's the one mind, so they're all arising within this one mind, but they're different aspects of the mind. Samadhi, how are they related to samadhi? Well, samadhi comes about through the continuous presence of mindfulness. So when you practice your sati sampajanya, say going back to the breath, sati sampajanya is focusing on the breath, getting to know the breath, then different things happen, don't they? You notice your mind and body calming down. You become more clearly aware, but also you experience the mind and body calming down, so you're more aware of piti and sukha arising. The factors of samadhi arise as mindfulness is more continuous. You feel more calm, the mind becomes more steady. So mindfulness leads on to samadhi. The continuous presence of mindfulness, supported by clear comprehension, helps you to remove the obstacles to samadhi, so hindrances, mental agitation, greed, anger, worry, fear, sleepiness, all those different agitating states of mind fade out as mindfulness becomes more continuous. So samadhi arises with the factors of samadhi. And when samadhi is present, the mind is calm, stable, steady. It has a certain power or energy to it as well. You can direct the mind to contemplate, to develop insight and really train wisdom. So wisdom arises on the back of samadhi. Samadhi is the foundation, wisdom develops out of it. So we train our mind. So like when I was a young monk, used to stay at this bit of forest on the Burmese-Thai border, which used to be a tin mine. And they have a waterfall and a stream several kilometres coming through what is the monastery area. It's just jungle, but at the bottom of a hill there's an area that used to be the tin mine. And the way they get tin, they dig up the tin, but it just comes up as rock. And they have to separate the ore, the tin, the metal ore, from this ordinary rock. And they didn't have a lot of equipment or power, electricity there, because they're right in the deep jungle. So the Burmese workers made a huge runway for the water. They diverted the water off the waterfall through wooden, kind of like a wooden channel chute for many hundreds of meters from the top of the hill down to the bottom. So they got this amazing, powerful chute of water that then they could put onto the rock and blast the rock to separate the tin from the ordinary rock, and then they get lots of tin which they can go off and sell until it all ran out because it's impermanent. But you can see how by channeling water you can even get enough power to blast rock, to separate different kinds of rock from each other. It's like the mind of samadhi. Once you've trained in mindfulness, clear comprehension, and samadhi is coming up, it's like the mind is powerful now. It can focus on things and examine things. You can use that energy to understand and see clearly the way things are. So if you direct the mind of samadhi to the body, you start to observe the true nature of the body, that it's impermanent, unsatisfactory, not self. What's the result of that? You get the deepest wisdom, which is the wisdom of relinquishment, letting go, dispassion, detachment. Because you don't want to attach to something that's inherently impermanent, inherently suffering, and is not a self anyway. So you use samadhi to support the deep penetration of wisdom in examining phenomena, both physical phenomena and mental phenomena, feelings, thoughts, memories, and so on. So these three qualities, sati, sampajanya, samadhi, and wisdom, help us throughout our practice, from the very beginning to the very end. The Buddha said the beginning of the development of wisdom is the practice of dana. Thinking, just having the thought, I can share some of what I've got with someone else who has less or needs help. That's the sort of wisdom, and you're training wisdom in the practice of dana by letting go of some of your attachment, your possessiveness, your greed, seeing the value of it, that's wisdom, seeing the benefits of it, the happiness that arises coming from letting go, the benefit and the good you can do in the world by practicing dana, helping others, they benefit, you also benefit because you're letting go of some of your attachment. So actually the practice of dana, which is often looked on as a sort of basic Buddhism, that's not the real Buddhism, not the real thing. But actually, if it's done with mindfulness, clear comprehension, and wisdom, you can actually realize the Dhamma in practicing dana, because you're letting go of self. The more mindful you are as you practice dana, the quicker your practice will develop. And the Buddha said, if you want to attain samadhi, it has to come from this practice of letting go. And so if you've never done any dana and shared what you have with others and helped others, it's unlikely you'll attain deep samadhi. So wisdom is used at every level of the practice, dana, sila, bhavana, right up to nibbana. So they're all to be cultivated, but they support each other. And sometimes wisdom takes the lead, sometimes samadhi takes the lead, sometimes mindfulness is taking the lead, as it were. But they're all supporting the development and the refinement of the mind, purifying it from greed, anger, delusion, to the point where it's completely pure. Those mental defilements, craving, attachment, have gone, finished. That's a few explanations. There's another question. How to help children benefit from the Dhamma teachings? I guess that's come up because of this time in the pandemic, the lockdown particularly. It is a difficult time. Been thinking about this, as I said today, we've gone from lockdown light to lockdown to real lockdown. So they've closed children's playgrounds because kids can catch COVID and pass to each other as well. So they don't want kids mingling too much. So it sounds pretty draconian, pretty drastic, but there's a purpose to it. Kids are not going to school, they're learning from home, so it is a difficult time for kids. So as a parent, I assume this is a parent asking, how can we help our kids? Well, it's not just in the pandemic, isn't it? If you've decided to have a child, it's a responsibility, isn't it? That's something you've got to take on or rise up to once you've decided, or whatever the reasons have come about that you've got kids under your care. That's a big responsibility. So the Buddha encouraged us to be a Kalyana Mitta, a true friend, a good friend to our kids. So as a parent, that's something you take on for life. It's a life-changing decision to have children. Comes with this responsibility. So the Buddha encouraged us to be, number one, be a good friend, meaning a good example to our kids, because we're adults, they're still young, whatever age they may be. They need good friends, and if we're not the good friend, they're going to get it from the phone or the iPad, and they're just exposed to everything the world has to offer, good and bad nowadays. So they really need guidance and examples around them. So number one is parents who live with them all the time. So if at this time during lockdown you're spending more time together at home, however frustrating or challenging it is, the more you put in effort you put into your practice to put the Buddhist teachings into practice, dana, sila, bhavana, mindfulness of actions, mindfulness of speech, the more you can benefit your child. Developing qualities that make them look to you as a guide, as a friend, somebody to respect, look up to. Learning to share whatever Dhamma we have understood with them. Not saying it's easy, but that's what we have to learn, isn't it? How to share our own understanding of Dhamma back with our kids on whatever level they require. So, being an example, keeping the precepts and being able to explain to them why it's worthwhile using the precepts as guidelines in daily life. Why do we try to practice and develop good karma and avoid making bad karma? From whatever you've understood, you can pass that on to your children. Encouraging them to make good karma in different ways. Even at home we can do this, can't we? There's plenty of things we can still do at home, even though it's limited, frustrating environment maybe, or everyone on top of everyone else. I know it's difficult, but you make the best of the situation you're in. So how can you encourage them to make good karma at home? Using their time well. So encourage them to do useful things for themselves, in their learning, school learning, and then learning other life skills. I've been talking to people, mentioning, teach your kids to cook. If they've never learned to cook, do some cooking with them so they know how to cook a meal and look after themselves. However humble or simple, can be fun, and they're gaining a skill that maybe becomes a life skill, how to cook food, understanding more about diet, what is good diet, useful diet for them, where food comes from. Talk to them and get them to explain whatever you've learned in your life about food, diet, cooking, how to do it, why it's valuable. Share that with them. That's a really good thing to do, especially if you're stuck at home together. How to look after themselves, clean up after themselves, how to look after their clothes, and also understand where clothes come from and the value of clothes. And, maybe teach them how to sew, how to mend a hole in their shirt or their sock, how to wash clothes, how to do all the things that you do as a parent in relation to the house. From time to time, put effort into that, use it as an opportunity, stuck at home, so get them involved a little bit with the kind of things that you do. See what they can learn depending on their age and their abilities. Same with if you have gardens. Gardening is quite a Dhamma orientated experience. So if you have any kind of garden, helping them to get out into the garden. If you can't go out anywhere because of lockdown, well, can you spend more time in the garden when it's not raining? Whether it's growing vegetables or flowers, if you have that space, that's good. Appreciating what there is in nature. Even if it is raining, being out in the rain together and understanding, it's all right sometimes to get wet if you have to get wet. enjoying nature in whatever small ways you can, recognizing plants, recognizing birds, animals, learning to pay attention to the world around us rather than always be stuck on a screen. The real world is also our eyes, ears, smell, taste, touch. So getting outdoors, even if it's only in the garden, even if it's only standing on a veranda looking at a view, you can talk about that. But being a good friend to them, and then of course cultivating loving kindness, which brings up patience, brings up an interest in the person you're with. When we're tired, we tend to shove people away, don't we? Even our kids, we shove them away in a room, give them something to occupy them. And I understand that may be the right thing to do sometimes, but we also have to share in their time, especially if we are forced to be together a lot during lockdown. Share in their time and see how you can introduce the Dhamma into the day, whether it's encouraging them to be mindful of their duties towards study or homework, assignments, explaining things, listening to them so you understand how they understand things, and seeing if you can encourage the Dhamma in the way they think, to understand more about karma, cause and effect, understand about relationships, understand about the results that come back to us from our actions. So good actions, good results. Unskillful, negative actions, negative results. How we talk to each other, treat each other, matters because it comes back to us. Having that time, energy, patience to keep being the good friend, to explain things the best you can, to be a good example, and encourage them to see the value of, simple things like, the environment of the home. If you're spending a lot of time at home, it depends on the people in it. The people are the ones who make the home. So our mood, if we're in a very negative, depressed mood, well, how to manage that? Help them to understand that better, not to take it out on other kids or other people in the house. How to be patient with the mood, how to see that if we can be patient, mindful of our mood, it maybe is for our benefit. If we can be patient when we're angry or upset and not harm others at that time, but just to be patient, watch it as a mood as it comes and then as it passes away, giving them some insight, some understanding about the human mind there and the value of being careful what we say and do, putting up with our own mood but not taking it out on others. And being example in that, learning the value of simple things like being kind even at a time when we're not wanting to be kind, smiling. If you smile, you put a smile on your face, you immediately feel better. Sit in the front of the mirror with your kids, especially if they're little kids, and look at the face, study the face. When you're smiling, you feel better. What's it like when we smile? And you get them to look in a mirror. What do they feel like when they're smiling? Becoming more mindful of their mood, understanding what is a wholesome mood, a wholesome thought, a wholesome state of mind, what it leads on to, what is an unwholesome state of mind and what that leads onto. Looking at each other, taking photos, selfies if you like to use phones. You take a selfie of the happy face, show it to them, their face, they can do their happy face, you take a picture of it. Then you take a picture of the grumpy face and show it to them. What's the difference? And get them to see that's what they're putting out into the world. If they're angry, you look one way, you act in one way. If you're kind, you look in a different way. You look different and you act differently. Getting to them to understand the roots of karma comes from intention, which goes into speech, into action. When we practice sharing, practice dana, you feel one way. When we act in more selfish or aggressive ways, different result. It's not always that they're ready to learn a lesson, but you do your best to try and explain these things when the situation arises. And you're giving them some very valuable education in, the human experience, as well as just knowledge from online when they're getting online teaching, from books and so on. You're also giving them life experience. When there's an appropriate opportunity, you can teach them that, show them that, and speak from your own experience. Often it's when we talk about our own understanding in our own practice of Dhamma and share that with another person, say our kids, is often the best, because it's true. You're speaking from what you understand, and then getting them to understand more about themselves. So obviously, if they're very young, reading Buddhist stories helps. Buddhist stories that have a meaning to them, and you can talk about the meaning, the lesson learned from it. If they're older, you might have to be more subtle. When they're older, teenagers don't want to read stories maybe, but you can still see if you can talk about their experience in terms of karma, good karma, bad karma, how to be more self-aware in situations. Talk to them more about their goals. What is a goal? What is happiness in life? What is success, happiness in life? Wherever you can, try to improve communication. So what usually happens is somebody becomes a teenager, they become more distant from their parents, and maybe communication becomes patchy. But especially at the time of lockdown, there may be opportunities to improve communication between you if your kids are older. That's Dhamma as well, isn't it? Good communication skills, being friendly, being tolerant of each other, accepting each other. You just do the best you can. Maybe that's the summary of it all. Do the best you can. Last question. How does rebirth occur? It's like the heart of Buddhism, isn't it? How does rebirth occur? It's because the mind of a human being at death still wants something. There's still a person who wants something. Wanting and desire is not finished with. So that leads the mind into the next birth. So the Buddha talked about consciousness. We're born, we have a consciousness. We have this mind that knows things. As we go through life, this consciousness is constantly picking up desires which lead on to attachment, which lead on to what we call becoming. So literally the cause of rebirth or birth is becoming. It's strange, becoming is a word the Buddha didn't describe very much, didn't explain it very much. It sort of means the way you identify with your sense of self and the world that you've created, your inner world as much as your external world. It's a sense of identity that has come about through constantly craving and attaching to experience. So the sum total of our likes and our dislikes, and what we want and what we don't want in life, and what we hope for and expect for in life, the sum total of that is becoming. So it's where karma is made. Those decisions to make karma through intentional action is where becoming is taking place and where birth is happening. So every intentional action, if there's still craving and attachment there in the mind, it's creating the causes for birth, little by little by little. So at the end of the physical life, all of that has sort of built up a whole train of a procession of causes and conditions affecting the mind that go into the new life, lead the mind into a new life. The practice of Dhamma is kind of reversing and ending that process. So every time you practice Dhamma, you'd bring up mindfulness, wisdom, as we were talking about earlier. When mindfulness and wisdom is present, there's the opportunity to see craving and attachment and becoming and let go a little bit. It's unlikely you'll let go of it all in one go, but little by little you're chipping away at the whole process of craving, attachment, becoming, bringing up mindfulness and wisdom in its place. So craving is going to cessation, attachment is going to cessation, becoming is going to cessation. So that process of practicing the Dhamma can bring you to the point one day, at some point, that craving and attachment and becoming are totally finished with, cease. So that's what we call Nibbana. On the way, one hasn't reached Nibbana yet, but on the way there may be some significant signposts or milestones. So the first is abandoning Sakkaya Ditthi. This is what a Sotapanna does, a stream enterer, one who enters the stream. They've abandoned the view that this body is a self. And that's a significant abandoning of craving, attachment and becoming. It's a significant changing of that whole process. So now, instead of always creating more craving, more attachment, more becoming, more birth, the mind is doing the opposite. It's now reducing the causes for more birth. So the Buddha said, one who's had enough insight to abandon Sakkaya Ditthi will be reborn at a maximum of 7 more lifetimes. From then on, they've already had a glimpse of the unconditioned, the deathless, where becoming and birth is finished. They've had a glimpse of that, but they haven't completely cut it off. So then there's the Sakadagami, continuing the practice, further abandoning craving and becoming, and they become what we call a once returner, one more birth at most. And then a non-returner. A non-returner, anagami, is if they die, they're reborn in the Brahma realms and no longer return to this world of human birth. So the practice of Buddhism is kind of teaching you to see, get you to the point where you can learn and see from your experience that craving and attachment cause becoming, cause birth and suffering. Of course, following on from birth is always more suffering. Aging, sickness and death is suffering. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief and despair are suffering. Nobody wants suffering, so if you can start abandoning craving, attachment and becoming, you're undermining the causes for future suffering. So when does the cause for more birth arise? Well, it arises in the present moment, doesn't it? So Ajahn Chah used to say, you have your food in front of you, smells good, looks good. If you give in to that greed at that moment, the desire, I like this, I want this, then that's a little moment of craving, giving rise to attachment, giving rise to becoming. So he says, like you're born into the pleasure of eating and having that food. And that's going on every day, isn't it? So if you're not mindful of eating, then we keep reinforcing that habit. It becomes a deeper clinging and attachment, more becoming. So just the simple process of eating food becomes the cause for birth. We're born into that, the happiness of it. Or maybe you get food that you don't like or don't want. Maybe you get born into the state of mind of, I don't want this, I don't like this, I hate this. Even food can do that. Then you multiply that by all the other kinds of activities that we're involved in the course of a day. Everything is becoming a cause for craving, attachment and birth. So in one sense it seems like a bit of a hopeless task, doesn't it, to undermine the causes for more birth, because it's like everything is making you going to go towards craving and attachment. Where do you start? It's just so much. But on the other hand, it's all going on in the one mind, your mind. So if you're training this mind in the path, sila, samadhi, panya, you're gradually homing in, focusing in on this process of craving, attachment becoming birth. More and more you're homing in on it, understanding it, seeing it better, more clearly. So little by little you can start reducing the causes and conditions for more birth. Until ultimately, the mind is right there all the time, not allowing craving, attachment becoming to take place. Stopping the whole process from moment to moment. It's not happening anymore, to the point where one reaches nibbana, the end of the whole thing. And the Buddha did talk about birth occasionally and rebirth. Like, there's one time one of his chief supporters, Anathapindika, died, and he's somebody the Buddha had spent a lot of time with. He'd done a lot of good to support the Sangha and support Buddhism, and there's many references to him in the suttas. And then he died. He was a wealthy man who'd built the Jetavana monastery, then he died, and the Buddha talked about seeing him reborn in the heaven realm, and talked a little bit about his heavenly rebirth. So what is it that's reborn? Well, could say the stream of consciousness. Anathapindika had made a lot of good karma. He'd meditated, heard the Dhamma, as well as practiced generosity and charity. So he'd made a lot of good karmas, a lot of good karma, good causes. So the Buddha is just pointing out, well, these good causes have led that stream of consciousness to be reborn in a heaven realm. So there are occasions where the Buddha talked about rebirth. So it's not like he didn't mention it. His whole teachings are, the term comes up and the explanation comes up throughout the teachings of the Buddha. Because ultimately we say there's no person that is born or died or reborn, but on the conventional level, it's to communicate ideas, we have to still talk in this way. Oh, there was a person called Anathapindika who died and was reborn in heaven. It's just a useful way of talking. But if you say, is there one thing that is Anathapindika that goes from this life to the next? Well, there isn't. It's a constant process of arising and ceasing of conditions. It's just causes and conditions that have led to that rebirth. And because it's just causes and conditions, there's no one soul or essence that goes from birth to birth to birth. Because there's no one thing that we say is a self, there's a chance to reach the deathless, the unborn, the uncreated, nibbana, because there is no abiding or lasting self or soul. But that has to be seen with wisdom and with insight. So in Buddhism we're also talking on these sort of two layers. There's the layer of truth that is just the superficial or assumed or conventional reality, where we say there's a person who's born, dies, reborn. And it's helpful, because most of the time we're working on that level, aren't we? We have that way of thinking. But for the mind that is well trained in the path, samadhi, insight is clear, it goes beyond the delusion of self. So it sees just phenomena. There are just phenomena arising and passing away. Physical phenomena, a body dies. Mental phenomena, a stream of consciousness arising and ceasing in this life and then into a next life until nibbana is reached. When there's no more causes and conditions for rebirth, there's no more craving and attachment affecting consciousness. So consciousness is, we say, purified. There's no more a sense of self or ownership, no more a sense of me, a person, me, mine, myself. That's gone. So if one develops lots of mindfulness, lots of wisdom, the causes for rebirth are diminished to the point where they no longer are there. So that's the end of today's questions. Food for thought, food for contemplation. I'd encourage you all, while there is lockdown and you're out there practicing at home, very limited options for movement going around, no one's going on foreign trips, foreign holidays, even just going shopping is just, one member per household, go out, buy the things you need to go and come back. You can't go visiting your friends. Well, this is a perfect time to practice more meditation, listen to the Dhamma, develop that wisdom and understanding, put it into practice. And maybe this lockdown can be a cause for you to reduce the causes for future birth. Maybe you might even attain Sotapatti Maggaphala this lockdown. There's just nothing else to do, just carry on practicing mindfulness at home, letting go of craving and attachment moment by moment. Turn the lockdown into something good in that way. So we'll wish you that. May you all attain the Dhamma eye this lockdown, and may you be safe, healthy, happy, harmonious, and we'll see you again next time.